Welcome to the Aced It podcast, where we turn science into sense. In this very special season funded by the Bureau of Justice Assistance, we provide 10 timely episodes with the hopes of helping listeners understand what we can learn from current research that will help correctional staff. And please note, we did not just guess at what correctional staff need to know. We traveled the country, interviewing individuals working in prisons and jails, and the topics of these episodes are exactly what they asked for. So, I'm Danielle Rudes, your host, and here we go. To start off this season, let's discuss a topic that is crucial, as many correctional systems, including several state and county departmental systems included in our recent study, and many others, are currently thinking about or doing. That topic is solitary confinement reform. Solitary confinement has been a controversial topic for quite some time now. Everyone seems to have an opinion on the subject. In this episode, we will present research, not opinion, that highlights the effects of solitary confinement and why researchers often suggest that eliminating the use of solitary confinement is a good idea, and one that is backed up by sound science. Some historical research, though, to get us moving. Historical research suggests that one of the first reported uses of solitary confinement traces all the way back to Pope Clement XL around the beginning of the 1700s. But depending on which history you believe, it may have started just before the 1700s with William Penn's model of torture and hard labor in America, later dubbed the Pennsylvania system. With the opening of Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, this model aimed to achieve reform and penance through the use of solitary and silent isolation, giving residents time to reflect, as they were devoid of most human contact, in an effort to help them redeem themselves. Not long after its origin, however, the Pennsylvania system of separate confinement was abandoned, as numerous incarcerated individuals died or their mental and or physical health deteriorated to a point of real concern. Additionally, it was no longer feasible due to lack of bed space and the need to double bunk. People of the time, like Charles Dickens once said, separate confinement is, quote, cruel and wrong, and it is slowly and daily tampering with the mysteries of the brain, unquote. Likewise, in a pamphlet on prison discipline written in 1841, a man named Augustus Such wrote that housing a person in those conditions, quote, will tend more to make a man a confirmed idiot than a good and useful member of society, unquote. Despite its pronounced and widely known failings, however, various versions of solitary confinement continued and persist in various forms today. The U.S. federal government and many other states and jurisdictions have recently relabeled segregated housing for individuals confined to prison. So instead of calling it solitary confinement, other terms like restricted housing units, segregation, or secured housing units, and administrative segregation are now much more common. However, no matter what term is used, this practice aims to deprive individuals of most social contact and confines them to a cell with or without a cellmate for roughly 22 and a half hours a day, with only limited opportunities to leave the cell for showers and cage time outdoors. In many restricted housing units, confined individuals commonly have no access to programming or visitation, except clergy and maybe attorneys, and privileges, such as the use of the phone or access to television, commissary, and tablets. These may all be completely or partially eliminated. Correctional facilities' reasoning behind subjecting individuals to restricted housing varies, ranging from facility needs to individual safety concerns. But more often than not, it is used as an additional form of punishment. Unfortunately, individuals with severe mental illness, cognitive impairments, people who identify as LGBTQAI+, and racial ethnic minorities are disproportionately represented in solitary confinement. Now, it's easy to understand why the use of solitary, or segregation, has been debated amongst professionals for many, many years, and why it consistently attracts substantial attention and criticism from psychologists, criminologists, medical personnel, sociologists, activists, and even lawyers. While some people have raised doubts about the extent of harm caused by solitary, numerous studies suggest that it can contribute to or worsen negative mental and/or physical health problems. In addition, extensive research conducted in non-correctional settings regarding isolation also indicates that social isolation, social exclusion, and loneliness have a significant impact on both physical and mental well-being. And yet, despite its many, many ills, segregation in one of many forms is often still present in U.S. prisons and jails, and it is still used with some regularity. As part of our effort to bring you emerging science on key topics related to prison and jail, we now call your attention to a systematic review done by Braun. Braun examined 21 studies that highlight the effects of prison segregation. Within these 21 studies, Braun considered two outcomes. 1, the psychological impact, and 2, the post-segregation outcomes. Braun found that segregation in prison can, in fact, have significant detrimental effects on individuals. When discussing the psychological effects, Braun notes that the majority of the studies, specifically 9 out of the 21 that she looked at, indicated some type of negative effect due to segregation. These negative psychological effects included mental illness, self-harm, and even suicidal tendencies among those subjected to this standard treatment. Regarding Braun's second consideration, post-segregation, her outcomes from 5 of the 21 studies is where she finds some mixed results. 3 had no negative impact, and 2 had a significant impact. While not all the studies found a direct negative impact on post-release outcomes such as recidivism or further misconduct, it was clear that segregation did little to alleviate these issues in the future. According to Braun, quote, "The inability of segregation to have a deterrent effect on outcomes, such as subsequent violent infractions or reoffending, raises questions about the utility of segregation, the basis for its implementation, and justification for its usage," unquote. Overall, isolated or relatively isolated housing, such as restricted housing within prison, was not found to contribute positively to the rehabilitation or reformation of individuals who are incarcerated, but rather, it increases the challenges an individual will face during segregation and/or post-release. The compelling findings by Braun demonstrate the harmful impacts of solitary confinement and suggest there is a very urgent need for policy reform. That said, let's partner the previous findings with a state-specific look at solitary confinement reforms in North Dakota. Recent evidence shows us that there are several state prison systems, like North Dakota, introducing new policies and implementing legal mandates aimed at reducing and eliminating the use of solitary confinement. However, limited knowledge exists regarding the specific types of policies and how these policies are being received by residents and staff. In a case study conducted by Cloud and colleagues, the researchers detail the nature of specific policy changes, the degree in which the policies are implemented, and they analyze the impact of this type of housing on the health and well-being of residents and staff in North Dakota's 2 largest prisons. This case study discusses how the involvement in an immersive exposure to principles, policies, and practices of the Norwegian Correctional Service played a pivotal role in guiding and inspiring the North Dakota state prison system to significantly reduce the utilization of solitary confinement. Policy reformation suggested a staggering 74.28% reduction in the usage of solitary confinement between 2016 and 2020. The researchers further explained that this result was achieved by implementing substantial modifications to the structure and operation of their units. Several positive changes in policies and practices were seen, in which they find these contributed to improvements in both the well-being and health among residents and staff. Also, North Dakota prisons noted that, except for one low-level fight in one of the 2 prisons, the violence-related infractions remained unchanged or showed improvements post-reform. This offers further compelling evidence for this needed shift within corrections. The reduction in the use of solitary confinement in North Dakota prisons suggests something else, though, about the feasibility of such reforms. Like, yes, This can be done. So as you think about the findings and insights from these two studies, or two articles and a lot of studies that were combined in the first one, and the history of what we know about solitary confinement in all of its forms, think about the clarity with which the evidence suggests that solitary confinement, a practice rooted in centuries-old beliefs about punishment and rehabilitation, is outdated. These ideas no longer align with our modern understanding of effective correctional practices, and what's more, they are not evidence-based. In fact, they fly in the face of evidence and perhaps even try to mock it. Both Braun's thorough review and Cloud's case study of North Dakota highlight how the traditional use of solitary confinement hinders the ultimate objective of correction, or if you like this word better, rehabilitation. And solitary confinement appears to, in fact, not fix problems, but instead makes individuals worse, which in turn has the potential to make that person and everyone around them, both staff and other residents, and later their family and communities, more unsafe. Kind of, not the point. Ever the teacher, I'd like to leave you with a few more resources in case you are interested in this topic and want to learn more. First, you can check out my book, Surviving Solitary, Living and Working in Restricted Housing Units, which details the hardships of such units on both residents and staff and offers a ton of reform suggestions in the final chapter. Also, if the history gets you jazzed, check out my colleague Ashley Rubin's book, The Deviant Prison, Philadelphia's Eastern State Penitentiary and the Origins of America's Modern Penal System, 1829 to 1913. And if you want help turning your ideas into action and or learning more about possible reforms, reach out to the amazing Bree Williams at University of California, San Francisco. Her work focuses on transforming correctional culture to focus on the health of residents and staff. She also considers their dignity and their humanity, and she brings science into her work when she's thinking about criminal justice reform. Yes, change is hard. But if you want it bad enough, you can do it. And please do it when it comes to solitary confinement. I promise you, it is for the betterment of us all. Thank you for listening to the Aced It podcast. We love hearing from you. So if you have comments, topics to suggest, or some research you'd like us to cover in a future season, please write to me, Danielle Rudes, at Sam Houston State University. My email is drudes@shsu.edu. And now, a whole bunch of thank yous. First, this project was supported by a grant 5PBJA 22AG00031 MUMU, awarded by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. The Bureau of Justice Assistance is a component of the Office of Justice Programs, which also includes the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the National Institute of Justice, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, the Office for Victims of Crime, and the Office of Sex Offender Sentencing, Monitoring, Apprehending, Registering, and Tracking. Points of view or opinions in this podcast are those of the host and the research team, and do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the U.S. Department of Justice. Then, more thank yous. Thank you to the Justice Community Opioid Innovation Network, or JCOIN's, Coordination and Translation Center, funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, housed at George Mason University, where this podcast originated. Thank you to our fabulous scriptwriter, SHSU master student Jalen Magana, and to my amazing research team at both Sam Houston State University and George Mason University. The team includes Bryce Kushmarek-McCune, Sydney Engel, Caitlin Bauer, Shalom Aganaya, Alexa Mata, Chelsea Narvi, Alyssa Toman, Miltonette Craig, and Wyatt Brown. And a huge and heartfelt thank you to Jason Luton and the team at Slonky LLC for their fabulous podcast production. Tune in again soon for another episode of Aced It.